Good afternoon, ladies and gents. It's the 21st of July, 2024, and today I'm going to provide you with part two, that being a quick summary of activities in the Ukraine and Russian war, in terms of sort of military movements, actions, and political sort of decisions that have been happening over the last 12 weeks. So that will be from May 2024 to the present day. So there is a part one, which was just before this, covering the last sort of 5 months, not the last 5 months, but from sort of January up until about May. And then this is part two. I'm always conscious of the length of time some of these videos are taking, but once these first 15 sessions are completed, most of the sort of daily updates that I'll be providing you with will be a lot shorter. There'll just be news updates on what's happening around the world. These first sessions have been sort of longer only because it's just important that I provide you with sort of meaningful and useful content when providing overviews of such sort of critical categories. Guys, I'm not even going to sort of throw up many images on this one here. Instead, we're just going to go through this sort of long list. It's not a long list. It's 70. I know it sounds long, but I'll go through these quite quickly. But these events that I'll show you on the screen in a minute. But I do want to sort of discuss the last couple of events in a little bit more detail and sort of bring you up to speed, because those last ones are kind of ones that have happened this week. And they sort of deserve just a little bit more sort of time and analysis on what's actually sort of happened or been said. So not in any sort of chronological order or any specific order actually, but I'm just going to rattle through these. Poland are priming themselves to agree on sort of shooting down any Russian missiles that enter its airspace, but more importantly, to also sort of shoot down Russian missiles over Western Ukraine. We've had Jens Stoltenberg, the NATO general, is leaving his position representing NATO, and he will be making way for former Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte. Canada sending non-combatant troops to Ukraine. Now, remember, guys, this is stuff, these are articles that have come out or sort of hit the public domain over the last 12 weeks or the last 3 months. So not necessarily, today, this week or last week. And they're not in the chronological order. So sort of carrying on, number four, what have we got? We got Finland. They've now sort of finalized US access to 15 military air bases in Finland, allowing the US and NATO forces to sort of move assets closer to the Russian border. So just changing the military posture, really, in favor of NATO, obviously. Putin is still yapping on about potentially taking, well, not taking out, but talking about, sorry, peace talks. Listen, guys, forget about that for now, because this game of chess is only really just getting started. The Secretary of State Austin states that if Ukraine falls into the hands of Russia, then a direct conflict with NATO is inevitable. ATACMS delivery to the Ukraine, agreed. So that's ATACMS missiles. Okay, I won't go into what they are and their sort of specifications, technicality or technical sort of data or anything like that. They're just missiles that are quite good, and the West or NATO are allowing Ukraine to use them, and they've also agreed to let them use them against Russian targets inside Russia itself. That's probably one that is going to be mentioned in this list. But attack on missiles targeting Sevastopol, taken down by the Russian air defense sort of system. So what happened there was the Ukraine sort of sent an ATACMS missile over into Crimea in Sevastopol. And the Russian air defense took it kind of intercepted the ATACMS missile. But what happened then is all the debris from that missile landed on a beach in Crimea, unfortunately killing a couple of Russians and injuring sort of over 100. The West, they go into overdrive when hearing that Russia had sort of potentially sent a satellite up into space loaded up with some kind of nuclear weapon. Sevastopol has been constantly bombarded by the Ukrainians over the last 3 months, destroying the Russian Black Sea Fleet vessels, or most of them, sinking a few of them. We've had Ukraine that have destroyed 14% of Russia's oil refinery capacity by March 2024. So that was up to that point. I'm not sure if that percentage is up. I would say it probably is because they have taken out nearly an oil refinery every week. But what that's done is that's forced the Russian government to introduce a 6-month ban on gasoline exports. So I don't know if that ban is still in place or not. Poland announced that they're ready now for combat against Russia and Belarus. So that's Poland. Ukraine have attacked many sites deep inside Russia as well. They've taken out military aircraft bases, particularly, and various other counter force targets. Ukraine have taken out critical Russian radar batteries or systems, and each of those sort of systems are costing anywhere in the region of $100 million per setup. Macron, as in the French president, announces that France intentions or intends sending NATO troops to Ukraine. Now it's not just France actually. There's quite a few. There's a big handful of countries now that are NATO allies saying that they are, that they're prepared or they're looking at sending their troops to Ukraine. Countries across the NATO alliance have been and continue to pump billions of dollars and tons of equipment into Ukraine. That's just ongoing, feeding the war machine. Germany's Scholz visited Xi Jinping, asking him to call on Russia to stop the war. So that was a meeting that they had. I don't think that got anywhere. Germany starts to prepare their hospitals for a high volume of casualties. So that's war preparations. ATACMS, again, that's going to be a key word here, being used to take out oil refineries, military bases, and airfields all across Crimea. I think I've kind of mentioned that already, actually. It's just worded differently. Britain and France agreed to use the Scalp and Storm Shadow missiles to be used on Russian targets inside Russia. Diplomatic relations between Russia and the US, but would no doubt include other Western countries are scaling back diplomatic relations. Right. Okay. So they're scaling back diplomatic relations between Russia and the US. I'll leave that there. France to send Mirage fighter jets and other countries sending F-16 jets to the Ukraine. They're pretty much already there, guys. You're going to, over the next few weeks, you'll hear about combat in the skies and sorties and targets taken out and all sorts of. This is going to be the next level, of chess play. Once we're talking about, combat in the sky, that's taking it to a completely different level. Russia losing Su-34s and Su-57 fighter jets by Ukrainian sort of attacks on their Russian air bases. Norway starts stockpiling grain. They say it's citing a pandemic, war, or climate change. It will be the middle one, unless they know something about a pandemic that we don't, and climate change. Well, why would you start stockpiling now? Is there going to be a climate, catastrophe or what? So it's war. But yeah, that's Norway starting to stockpile. Russia positions nuclear missiles to its border with Finland. That was inevitable as soon as Finland became, a member of NATO. The US and NATO military bases go on high alert. So that's going to be US bases mainly located across Europe. British MP Andrew Bridgen, he warns that NATO are planning a false flag attack on a European city using a dirty bomb, and will then blame Russia for it. I'm going to take that with a pinch of salt. That's actually, I'm going to say, I mean, listen, that could happen definitely, but for an MP to get on, on the public domain and start saying that sort of thing, I don't know, he might be smoking crack or something. I'm not too sure. I don't know why he's saying that. It could happen, but it just seems really, really. It's an unprofessional thing to do, to sort of get on there on social media and start spouting off about that sort of thing. That's a big accusation. Russia continues to threaten war with NATO and its allied members. Well, that's it. That's been going on since day one anyway. Nuclear forces across NATO have been on high alert for months now, with nuclear assets being repositioned all over Europe. We have nuclear forces across. No, I've just said that. We've got thousands more NATO troops moving to Poland. Russia bans 81 Western media websites. Latvia are preparing bomb shelters. Latvia launch a 100-page, 72-hour war preparation or preparedness booklet to its population. I've done a video on that on the Latvian and the German preparedness booklets. Watch it. It comes after this. It comes after this video. So try and watch these videos in order, sequentially if you can, because it's kind of logical. They've been created logically. Germany launch its 67-page preparedness booklet. Have I just said that? Yeah. Latvia. I mentioned Latvia and Germany. US RQ-4B recon UAVs are being targeted, and attempts to shoot them down are being sort of conducted, or those sort of missions are being conducted by the Russians. Elections happening across the world this year. I think there's 64 in total. So there are shifts happening across many sort of government structures. The UK now have a new prime minister. Woohoo! Yeah, great. Anyway, multiple NATO allies making sort of suggestions on sending troops to the Ukraine. I've said that. Civilians injured and killed on beaches in Crimea. I've said that again, so I apologise. Some of these are actually duplicated. Russia running tactical nuclear weapon drills. We've got numerous ambassadors have now left Russia, and many sort of neighbouring countries have closed their borders into Russia. We've got nuclear doomsday planes up in the air most weeks now, along with nuke sniffers, as that's planes, and also nuclear bombers. We've got the rapid corridors being created across the European theatre to allow the transportation of military assets, obviously ramping up for the war. Russia attempts to take Kharkiv in Ukraine, but they failed. Germany to start conscription soon. Well, there's two, three, four. I think there's 4 or 5 other countries that have, or the governments of countries have suggested the same. Assassination attempt on a Slovakian prime minister. He survived, luckily. I think he was shot 3, 4, 5 times, something like that. I haven't heard anything about him since. Poland are drafting 120,000 reservists, troops, to be placed on the border of Kaliningrad. Russian naval ships and submarines off the coast of Venezuela, Caribbean, Cuba, and Florida. So that's Putin flexing his muscles and just, just provoking. Should we say as provocation? To be honest with you, Poland spent 2.5 billion on border fortifications. We've got Russia and the US nuclear war radar systems activated sort of numerous sort of times this year. These are over the horizon radar systems that they're rarely on. They're when they come on, they come on for a very good reason. Where are we? Putin has not stopped mentioning the use of nuclear weapons for weeks now. He says it every week now. So you have to listen to what's being said here. Finally, F-16s arrive in Ukraine. They're already there. I think they've been there for a while, but they're making it public a lot more sort of this week and next week, with a handful of trained Ukrainian pilots. Of course, there's going to be other pilots from other countries flying those planes, I guess. Russia removes borders, sort of border markers in Estonia. So that was out there on the waters. The US to bring back mandatory military service. So there's the US talking about the same thing. We've got Putin. He warns of global conflict and says NATO are preparing for nuclear strikes. Well, what do you what do you expect? Putin continues to threaten, the whole of NATO and everyone else with nuclear attacks. So, what's he expecting? NATO grants permission for Ukraine to use its weapons to strike targets inside Russia. Again, I think I've kind of touched on that. This one's been spoken about a number of sort of months, like it's been going on for a couple of months now, but it seems like we're getting ever closer to sort of seeing these F-16 jets deployed and flown by the pilots on behalf of the Ukraine. Now, I'm saying this again because this is going to be a game changer. I'm not going to get into the geopolitics of everything. I can't stand all that. But this is going to be the next phase of the war. Once we're talking about jets, because F-16s are capable of being armed with nuclear tipped missiles. So that's a direct threat. And you know, this could trigger all sorts of stuff. I'm going to leave that there. I just want to get through this list. US to expand nuclear arsenal, so they will be expanding, their nuclear capabilities. UK preparing for World War Three. Well, yeah, the whole of NATO has been, so it's not just the UK; it's the other 31 member states or countries. Russia tests missiles off the US coast, actually, the East Coast, US East Coast. Denmark tells citizens to stockpile iodine tablets. So there's another flag there. NATO to also expand nuclear arsenal. Well, that's what I've just said. It'll be the whole of NATO. We're being threatened by Russia, so that's exactly what you'd expect. Putin signs defense pact with North Korea, and North Korea suggesting to send troops to Ukraine. Yeah, well, good luck with that. China have troops on the border of Poland in Belarus. Yes, there's not many troops. I think there's one plane that went in. Half of that plane was full of kit. They're doing some kind of exercise, so they say. I think it's just a little bit of a flexing the muscles kind of thing going off there, but it's one to watch. Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, and Alexander Vucic, the Serbian president, that is, they seem to think that all sorts of shit's going to hit the fan between now and the end of this year. These two, if you don't know, seem to have sort of a closer relationship to Vladimir Putin and other sort of adversaries from the East. However, they have sort of said that they've been sort of trying to get together some kind of peace negotiations on the table between the Ukraine and Russia. And Hungary have been a sort of member of NATO since 1999, and both Serbia and Hungary are also stockpiling all of the necessaries to survive what is coming, based on what these two are assuming. We can only say that they're assuming, although we don't know. I mean, they might have intelligence and inside information. They might have gone and spoken to Putin, and he's turned around and said, "Listen, this is all going to kick off by Christmas." Who knows? Just the last couple here. We've got um, we've got Russia downs a USRQ-8 intelligence drone. So I think if you go back 20 of those points, USRQ-4B recon UAVs are being targeted and attempts to shoot them down. That's Russia shooting them down. So they've actually shot, I think they've shot more than one down, to be honest with you. But that's something that's happened. That's definitely one that's come down. Belarus threatens to use tactical nukes. Well, yeah, good luck with that as well. US to move long-range missiles to Germany. I'm going to talk about that in a second. That's one that's been sort of mentioned just recently, and there's a little bit, there's a couple of things we need to look at with that. So I'll say it again. It was US to move long-range missiles to Germany. Then we've got just recently the attempted assassination on Donald Trump. This is more of a geopolitical sort of incident, of course, because it's not directly related to the Ukraine and Russia, but it could have an impact. So it's still worth sort of noting, because well, Trump in power changes the geopolitical stage. Then we've got oh, I just said this right. I've got to apologise. I've duplicated some of these, but this is America to deploy long-range missiles to Germany in 2026. Now we need to kind of have a look at that. There is another one, but I'm just going to sort of spend a couple of minutes on this one sort of first, because it does deserve looking at in sort of detail and analysing. So the Russian state TV. Some of you would have seen it out there. It's probably, it's probably done its rounds. Poor quality sort of video. But basically what they're doing is they threaten the whole of Europe with nuclear attacks on all sort of capital and major cities. This includes London, Manchester, Birmingham, the submarine naval base in Clyde, Scotland, and naval bases in Portsmouth here in the UK. They've warned that following the deployment of US long-range missiles into Germany, Russia sees this as a direct threat and has warned that all capital and major sort of European cities are now targets. Russia sort of pays special attention to Britain, quoting our traditional enemy, and a significant part of Russian northern fleets will be sort of assigned to to deal with Britain. That's the threat there. So that's going to be the Russian Northern Fleet. That's going to be their navy to come and sort us lot out. If we're to take these kinds of threats seriously, then just ask yourselves whether or not these threats are real. I believe the biggest threat to us here in the UK, from Russia, that is going to be submarines. I've said it in a couple of previous videos, and I'll probably say it again. With the earlier threat from Russian state TV threatening the UK specifically with the Russian Northern Fleet, hence my concerns with the submarines. The Northern Russian fleet consists of 8 submarines, I believe. At the top of the list are their nuclear-powered sort of new generation Borei class submarines. That's spelled Borei, of which there are 4. And then they've got the older submarines, which are the Delta Class 4. They're nuclear-powered submarines, of which they've got 6 in service. So we're talking about 10 nuclear-powered submarines in their Northern Fleet, and they all carry ballistic missiles. So just to put that into context, one of their Bora class or Borei class subs, which have been designed to replace those deltas, they carry what's known as the Bulava SLBM, or the Submarine Launch Ballistic Missile. So that's the Bulava, the Bulava. The missile has a range of 8,300 kilometers and is capable of carrying 10 100 to 150 kiloton warheads. So that's 10. This is per missile. So specifically designed, this missile was sort of specifically designed or sort of purposely built to take out initially air defense systems. And each submarine can carry 20 of these missiles. So each submarine armed with up to 100 to 150 kiloton warheads. So you have to sort of just take you only need a couple of these subs from that Russian Northern Fleet to be designated for attacks on the UK. And there's potentially 400 warheads, 100 to 150 kiloton warheads heading for counter force and counter value targets here in the UK. So then you have to sort of expect Russia to be targeting those locations that I've mentioned, well, not just the locations I've just mentioned, but those locations that Russian TV channel or that Russian state TV channel have mentioned. Hence the reasons why, guys, it's important for us to sort of, or not for us, for you to watch those 2 videos on those UK targets. Check to see if you live anywhere near those targets. I've got 40 of them. I've identified 40. There's going to be more, but there's 40 primary targets. And funnily enough, actually, the 3 of them have been mentioned on the Russian state TV broadcast. Once you've identified these targets and your location, obviously what you're doing is you're looking to see if you're in any of those danger areas. Then what I would suggest you do is you simulate those 100 to 150 kiloton detonations using the online nuke map simulator. Again, I've mentioned that in the previous video. Once you've done that, you can then properly prepare for a possible nuclear strike. Actually, these are being done sequentially. They've not been created sequentially. This is part 2. So this part 2 will come after part 1. This is how I'm going to slot this in. So these possible UK targets and the nuke map simulation and detonation, stuff like that, those videos actually come straight after this one. Okay, so this will make sense what I'm trying to say here. So I'm talking about nuke map and simulating detonations in your area. I explain how to do that exactly on the next 2 videos. You would only need one of those subs really positioned off the coast of Britain with 20 missiles primed and ready to sort of take out intended, like I say, counter-force targets, that being the military targets here in the UK. These these Bulava missiles are said to be able to carry decoys. And according to sort of Russian officials, the missiles RVs are capable of sort of in-flight maneuverability and retargeting. So basically what they're doing, they're designed to sort of outmaneuver and it's outmaneuver, right? So basically air defense here in the UK will see those warheads coming in, and these warheads or these missiles are designed to sort of maneuver and outclass these defense missiles. So listen, enough about these sort of stealth demons of the ocean. I'm going to leave it there, for this video because we're going off tangent here and we're talking about submarines. And I've got a specific video on submarines as well because it is, honestly, it's a high level threat to the UK. Guys, I keep saying this, and I'll continue to say it. Whilst there are Russian submarines swimming around in our oceans off the coast of Britain and other European countries, then you need to pay special attention to this threat. I'm just not sure how much more information people need. In fact, no, I won't. I'm gonna do. Let's. Let me see if I can play you this video if you haven't seen it already. And what I'm going to do is let's just expand it here. Let me just pause that. So I'm going to translate what he's saying. Okay. It is, it's a poor quality clip. I mean, look I don't know whether it's because I've got a poor copy of it. It's off of X, but let me just read out what he's saying in translation. But the reason why this video has aired is because the US will start deploying long-range sort of fire units to Germany in 2026. Now, I know that's a couple of years away, but according to a joint statement from both the US and the German governments amid I think it was the NATO summit in Washington this week, the presenter on this Russian channel says the following. And what I'll do, let me just play it on. So what he says is a quick look at the tactical and technical characteristics of the missiles is enough to realize that the United States is throwing Europe into the melting pot of the World War with guaranteed mutual destruction. In Germany, the Pentagon will deploy missiles that pose a direct threat to Russia, reaching St. Petersburg, Kazan, Moscow, Novosibirsk, and Yekaterinburg. We are talking about missiles. This is what this presenter is saying. I'll play it in a minute, but he says we are talking about missiles that fall under the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which was destroyed by Trump. So that was a treaty that Trump probably ripped up and threw in the bin. He then goes on to say that, let me just play some of this because you want to sort of have a look at the graphics as well, because you'll see on here that they're showing the targets.
Речь о ракетах, подпадающих под разрушенный еще Трампом договор ПРСНД, то есть средней и меньшей дальности. Радиус поражения обозначенный в документе от 500 до 5500 километров. Несложно предположить...
So this is where he shows these the intended targets. Let me stop. Yeah, he then says that is medium and short range. The radius of destruction indicated in the document is from this. I'm not sure if this is a document that's been ripped up. Is from 500 to 5,500 kilometers. It is not difficult to assume the geography of the response in case the short White House press release becomes a reality. All European capitals are at risk if our missiles are in Kaliningrad. And then what he does, he goes on and he tells you the target locations.
Берлин, Варшава, все Прибалты, Париж, Бухарест, Прага. Конечно, американские базы в Германии. Гармии Шпаркенкирхен, казармы Патча, Шпангдален, Рамштайн. Особое внимание.
So this final part, he goes on to say Berlin, Warsaw, the Baltics, Paris, Bucharest, Prague, and American bases in Germany. That's Garmisch-Partenkirchen, that's Kirchen, the Patch Barracks and the Spanderhelm, and also in Ramstein. They're the 4 US air bases in Germany. And then he says special attention, as you can see on the screen there, to Britain, our traditional enemy. Oh dear. As a significant part of the Northern Fleet will work against her, that meaning Britain. Washington puts not only London under attack, but also Manchester, Birmingham, the large naval base, Devonport, which is in Clyde in Scotland, where the King stores Trident missiles. That's nuclear missiles. Portsmouth and Chatham Dockyard in Kent. Britain is most vulnerable. And he finishes off by saying, all it takes is 3 missiles and this civilization will collapse. Let me just show you the rest of that.
Будет работать значительная часть Северного флота. Под удар Вашингтон ставит не только Лондон, но и Манчестер, Бирмингем, крупнейшую военно-морскую базу Девонпорт, Клайд в Шотландии, где король хранит ядерные ракеты Трайдент, Портсмут и Чатамскую верфь в графстве Кент.
And that's it. So that's all they say. I'm going to get rid of that. Let's get back on to here. But yes, so I just wanted to sort of emphasize that. But I'm not just going to sort of leave that there. After watching this initially, beginning of the week, I think I started to sort of let my emotions get in the way whilst I was sort of making, whilst he was sort of making direct threats to the United Kingdom and other European neighbours. And why? Because he's threatening to kill me, my family, and everyone else in this country, as well as thousands of others around the world. And then I thought, let's actually listen to what this mug is saying. He starts off saying that Russia aren't happy because the US will be moving long-range missiles into Germany. But of course, it's okay for Russia to have already moved nukes, to its own sort of borders with Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Ukraine. And it's also all right for Russia to have already moved medium-range missiles into Kaliningrad, and also they've moved nukes into Belarus. Now that's okay, isn't it? But quite frankly, it's Russia is a threat, and we will protect our borders. We've got no choice. He then goes on to say that it is America that is causing all this shit, and it is the US throwing Europe under the bus and all the rest of it. However, what you don't hear him saying is that neither America nor Ukraine, come to think of it, are amongst that target list. But let's just look at those targets, shall we? Just quickly. I'm from the UK, so I can tell you about the UK ones, and I'll try and tell you about the European ones. He threatens Berlin in Germany. There's one military base there and one barracks, so it's not even worth it. I don't even know. I don't know the extent of the military base, but it's just, in Berlin, it seems pointless. It wouldn't be much of an achievement. Warsaw. He goes on to say Warsaw in Poland. Now, they've got the general staff of the Polish army building and the general command of the army or the armed forces buildings. If they're in close proximity of each other, then that would be a counterforce target to take out. They've probably got sort of command. Well, their commanders, a general command there, and the general staff. So you'd expect high-ranking officers and maybe intelligence going off there. So yeah, possible. Then he says the Baltics. So of which, there are sort of 3 very small countries, that being Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. But then you have Finland as well. So Finland is a larger sort of country. So what are the targets that he's talking about? So he's probably talking about, although he didn't even mention Finland, which is strange again, because it's Finland that have got the 15 sort of Finnish military bases that they've just agreed for the US to sort of occupy. However, he doesn't mention Finland. So America's a threat. Finland is probably the biggest threat in the Baltics, and Ukraine, where he's fighting. Those 3 haven't even been mentioned. It's everyone that's not involved as such. He then goes on to talk about Bucharest in Romania. They have 6 to 7 counter-force targets in that city, which is relatively small. So, many eggs in one basket. So that's a probable target. You got Prague in the Czechoslovakia or the Czech Republic. There are 4 to 5 counter-force targets in this city, mainly military sort of air force bases and barracks. So yeah, there's 4 or 5 targets there. US bases in Germany, of which there are 4, which he mentioned, dotted around the south of the country. And then he moves on to British targets, specifically mentioning London, Manchester, and Birmingham. There are no valuable counter-force targets in either Birmingham or Manchester. so that's pointless. London, on the other hand, has numerous military barracks in the city. There will be command and control centres sort of under counterforce targets. There will also be sort of counter value targets in pretty much all of your capital cities mentioned. Remember, guys, counter value targets could be sort of government and intelligence buildings, oil refineries, shipping docks and ports, data centres, and the list goes on. He did point out, though, two British counterforce targets of value, that being His Majesty's Naval Base Clyde in Scotland, which is the UK's nuclear submarine base, and also Trident missiles are stored there. So that is a primary target, probably the most important, I would say, in this country. And he finishes off by saying all it takes is 3 missiles to destroy the whole of the UK. Firstly, I don't know who even runs the Russian state TV channel. But whoever it is needs to invest in. They need to invest some money into that platform, because it's just very poor. The quality, the graphics, the whole lot is it's like a Scooby fucking Doo or something. I don't even know what's going on with it, but it's poor. Has the channel sort of received information directly from the Russian government in terms of those potential targets? So, as Putin said, this is what we're going to do, or is it just, that channel getting on their high horse because they feel threatened? Like I say, as the presenters all just looked on the European map or Google capital cities across Europe with military bases and then just put that shitty graphic together, I don't know. But nevertheless, we can't be complacent. But let's just get a couple of things straight here. NATO have been monitoring Russia as a nation, collecting sort of mountains of data on Russian sort of military assets and movements over the years, many, many years, to be honest with you. Intelligence services across the world, would have been doing the same, and vice versa. All countries would have been doing it. They have been for years and years. That's your spy war. That's what goes on. Your intelligence war, sorry. And they continue to collect this data, through intelligence, and therefore they already know which sites and locations are possible counterforce or counter value targets, not only for the Russians, but also the Chinese and the Koreans and various other countries in the East. So they're sort of threats, that are being made at the moment. And remember, Putin and various other members of his clan that are sort of always making the same threats publicly on the political stage. It's going to be our job, really, as in the West, to sort of determine whether or not these threats are real. If you ask me, I believe that NATO definitely see Russia as a direct threat to the security, of the Northern Alliance, certainly. And with that, they're preparing. There are, without a doubt, military assets being moved all over Europe. The military infrastructure needed to support NATO is being deployed. Countries are on a war footing and have been, because the threat is real. Military equipment is being sort of manufactured and pushed off the production line as we speak. Stockpiles of ammunition and other logistics are in motion, and the list goes on. It's just we don't see it, guys. You're not going to be disclosing too much of that information, because what is confidential information. You don't let your enemy know what you're doing. Not like they do, like Russia making all those threats. They're just exposing themselves totally. But guys, you're not going to, you're not going to sort of see a lot of this sort of happening, like I just said, unless, of course, you're on the Russian border somewhere. This video clip is shit, it's poor, and the information sort of presented has been sort of plucked out of the air. However, regardless of where the information comes from and who's making those threats, the threats are real. Personally, I think Russia know they now have a very big problem on their hands. Did you know this, actually? Now, I just wanted to get this point across, which because, and I'll tell you why I'm going to say this next piece, because I've heard so many, so many comments online about how Russia's winning the war and how they're doing this and how they're doing it and how they're taking loads of land and you're jumping onto deep state maps and blah, 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 blah. There's a statistics that I've kind of managed to lock down. And did you know that when Russia sort of invaded Ukraine in February 2022, they thought the operation was only going to last 2 to 4 weeks for starters. That's the Russians. They managed to take 20% of the Ukrainian territory in February of that year, which then quickly went up to 27% in March 2022. And then in April, it went down to 20%. So Ukraine obviously pulled back 7% of its territory. So that was in April 2022. And as of May of this year, the Russians only occupy how much of the Ukrainians' land do you think? 18%. Okay, so the Russians occupy 18% of the Ukrainian territory at the moment. So over the last 2.5 years, shall we say, of the war, the Russians have gained 0.1% more land than it had in December in 2022. So when you listen to these people online and various channels and wherever else people are getting their information from, telling you that Russia are winning the war, just I would take it with a pinch of salt. Of course, there's land, there's territory being taken and then it's being reclaimed. Okay, but they haven't gained much in 2.5 years. And remember, this was a special operation that was going to last 2 to 4 weeks. So the Russians have gone nowhere in the last 2 years, whilst they're losing 1,000 soldiers per day on the front lines. In contrast, though, the Ukrainians, and again, it depends on where you're getting your information from, and I'm not going to be biased with either side or whatever it is, but the Ukrainians are hammering sort of counter force and counter value targets inside Russia on a weekly basis now. They're pushing the Russians back out of the Black Sea. They're flattening Crimea in terms of military targets right across Crimea. And once that operation is done, they'll take out the bridge. It's guaranteed that Kirk Bridge is going to come, that will be taken out without a doubt. And that will just stop Russia from being able to replenish Crimea. But before we finish off, let me just remind absolutely everyone out there, let's not forget one thing here. Back in 2014, on the 24th of February, Russia invaded Crimea and nothing was done to support Ukraine back then. Then Putin is obviously thinking, oh, fuck it. That was easy enough, wasn't it? I'll just cross the border again and go and take some more land. Now, listen, guys, if you think anyone in the world should be supported, or you should be supporting anyone in the world that goes into another country and invades them, then let me ask you this. Is it okay for you to post your postal address on here and then for somebody else to just come round to your house and just kick you and your family out of your house and put you onto the street? Some of you are going to be sat there saying, yeah, I'd like to see him try and all that shit. But that's not what I'm trying to say here. It's not all right to invade another country. Okay. Those are actions of a bully. Okay. That's as simple as that. And because it's not right to invade other countries and just simply move in, that is why the West cannot and will not allow this to happen again. Okay, we allowed it to happen in 2014. You can't be seen to be doing it again. If you allow this to happen, you're giving everyone the green light to be able to go off and do the same. If we don't put a stop to Putin's madness, then we're just as bad as he is. Just a quick point on bullies, as I mentioned that just now. My old man's always said to me, son, if you ever stood in front of somebody, ready to fight, and the person in front of you is mouthing off, telling you, do you know who I am? Do you know who I know? And all that bollocks. They don't want to have it. If they did, then they'd just cut the bullshit out and have a fight. What they're trying to do is sort of waffle their way out of it. What they're trying to do is sort of scare you so that you do nothing because they don't want to have the tear up in the first place. Similar to the behavior of a bully will try and intimidate someone he or she thinks won't fight back. A bully will take things off of you, give you a slap here and there. They sort of tend to have no sort of real values. However, do you know the primary reason why bullies bully? Is because in many cases, when bullying occurs, bullies perceive their targets as a threat. The victim of bullying may be, I don't know, different or otherwise unique in a way that sort of stands out to the bully. Bullies also do what they do because they have a desire for power. And sometimes this goes back to bullies feeling threatened by those individuals with that intent to sort of instill fear in others as a means of gaining power. However, there is another reason why people become bullies, and that is revenge. Research shows that there are certain times when bullies genuinely believe that their target wronged them at some point in it or another in their lives. So, for Putin, both analogies can be applied. Maybe he feels threatened by the West and also thinks that the West has wronged him in some way. On top of this, there are other reasons why bullies bully. It could be cowardice. And if we're sort of talking about Putin, this also applies. It's like me knocking on the old age pensioners' door across the road, like for me, and just telling them to sort of get out of the house because I'm moving in, like I've just said. Putin has gone into another country, a country a lot smaller than Russia, and told them that we're moving in and you fuckers are moving out. And why? Because he can. A larger country, a larger army, and a bigger nation by about 100 million more people. So sort of cowardice, they sort of call it. I'd like to see him sort of try, the same dirty trick with any of the NATO ally countries. And finally, as I've gone way off track again, and there's no point in stopping now, but another reason why a bully bullies, and that is sadism, believe it or not. Pure sadism is certainly a factor with certain bullies, and indicates a more pathological or even psychopath drive behind their actions. There are certain people who merely enjoy being able to put others down. However, when sadism is the strongest factor behind bullies' actions, they're likelier to be much more dangerous than bullies sort of driven by other factors because they don't have a conscience, feelings, or even remorse. So we could also place Putin into that arena as well. It seems that, he doesn't value other people's lives, certainly those of his own people, and definitely not those of people from the West, and no doubt from other countries or other parts of the world. And this is why you have to listen to what he is saying and do not assume that nothing is going to happen. And he's, he were, you have to, you can't dismiss what he's saying. It could be, it could be all threats and stuff like that. But when you sort of listen to the threats being made and the actions, of his ways since, he's been in power, you have to consider this fucker as a direct threat to national security and humanity. And that, ladies and gents, is why people need to take those bubbles off their heads. And just wake up to what's going on around them and just take notice of the possible threats to you and your family in whichever country you live in. Just because it seems that he falls into the realm of being a bully, shall we say, does not mean he's not a threat. I'm starting to apply this analogy here amongst the superpowers, actually. Firstly, Russia hasn't stopped threatening to use nuclear weapons against the West, when in fact he's fighting the Ukrainians. He wasn't threatened, or he didn't sort of threaten to nuke Ukraine, though. Not as far as I know. I don't know. He may have, but not on this Russian state TV clip. The reason he's threatening nukes is because he's a coward and knows that no one really wants to go down that road anyway, so it's easier to threaten that if no one really wants to do that. And therefore, that's the reason why he's sort of doing it. He's the person in front of you mouthing off about how hard he is, how he's going to fuck you up. But in reality, he's probably sat there shitting himself. He's being backed into a corner, I think. He's losing 1,000 soldiers in the, you can call it what you like, but it's a human meat grinder every single day. He's transporting World War II tanks to the front lines of the battlefield. And honestly, the whole of its military just looks, I don't know, I just haven't seen anything that impresses me in terms of the military assets on the Russian side. Not really, not in comparison to, some of the shit we've got going off over here. And I don't mean here in the UK, I mean in the West. He's gained less than 1% of territory since December 2022. And let's not forget, he's now running off to China and North Korea for help. And like I've already said, NATO haven't even started yet. Putin has completely exposed himself out there on the battlefield, whilst NATO have just been sort of collecting all the data and just preparing. Once Putin is taken out, and unfortunately, that would mean the use of tactical nukes in places across the battlefields in the European theatre, then the likes of China are no longer a threat. And whilst we're on the subject of the enemy, I'm sorry, but I just can't see what kind of threat North Korea are to the West. The landmass is no bigger than the size of Ireland here in Great Britain. It's like Ireland, the Irish. No disrespect to the Irish, I love the Irish, but it's like the Irish saying, you know, we're gonna nuke you lot because we don't like you or whatever it is. It's just, you know what I mean. But anyway, you know, it's not about the size necessarily. It's about the firepower behind it. What I'm trying to say is, I just cannot. I've struggled to even take seriously that King Jong-un. I can't take him seriously at all. I look at him and I don't even know. I don't know whose idea it was to put that puppet up there and do what he does and says the things that he says. You know, he's a clown. We also have to remember this though. Whilst he's throwing everything into sort of the Ukraine and threatening the West, NATO haven't even started yet. Yeah, we may have been throwing shitloads of worthless money at it, and you know, we may have sort of mercenaries doing their business on special ops and all the rest of it, but we haven't even started yet. And if people, you know, want to get on the subject of nuclear weapons and the use of them, remember this: there is only one country that have already used nukes on the battlefield, and that is America. If anyone sort of out there thinks for 1 minute that the Russians are a threat, then you better think again. And not only that, the population of Russia is only 145 million in a country which is it has so much sort of land mass. It's a huge country. The population's not all that, and the country is still living in the dark ages with World War II doctrines and mythologies. You know, that's how I see it. I might be totally wrong, but it's just this is how I'm reading it at the moment. They may have some ace cards up their sleeves and stuff like that, but I'm reading the book as I see it. Guys, it's not to say that Russia isn't a threat, okay? Because they clearly are. But this is my view. If the man in front of you is stood there gobbing off and making all sorts of threats, then he doesn't really want this. Otherwise, he would just do it. And for this Russian sort of state TV channel to be threatening the whole of Europe, we fought more wars on this continent than any other. Long and hard battles as well, guys. So if it's going to happen, then let's have it. It's got to go, and that's it. I refuse to get emotionally involved with any of this. The most important job here now, I think, is for me and for you lot really to sort of just make sure that we're prepared and you know make sure that your families are protected but with you know by the best of your ability. I mean, that's what I'm going to be doing. You know, at the moment it's a challenge, but you have to do it. If and I keep saying this if, but in capital letters, if anything goes down, Putin knows that NATO are readying themselves, and I don't think he's ready for it. Hence the reason why he's threatening to nuke everyone. After watching this, I actually, and this is that video clip. I actually don't give a damn whether or not people, you know, want to sort of accuse others of fear mongering and scaremongering. I don't care if people want to continue being normalcy biased and choose to sort of continue walking through life with bubbles on their heads. For me and my family, this is a direct threat to the UK, Europe, and NATO. And that, ladies and gents, is all I need to prepare. So, you know, you can make whatever accusations you like. You can whatever. I don't care actually. You know, I'm putting the information out there and just letting you know that there's a threat. So, that's it. That's it on that additional list, or sort of part two of the Ukraine-Russian war activity so far in 2024. Two parts. Okay, these are all this. This is all the stuff that's happened so far, and I've got to be quick to get this out there because there's stuff happening every day. And I'd have to keep adding to this list. Actually, just one more um, to sort of add to the list, which has sort of happened yesterday or the day before, and that was the computer outage that happened. A third-party cybersecurity company providing security to Microsoft and other clients released it was a computer patch update or whatever you want to call it, affecting sort of millions of devices, causing the outage. Now, I've worked in IT for nearly sort of 25 years, and I'm telling you now, there is no way this was any kind of mistake. The coders and the developers responsible for writing that update would have tested and back tested this update on a test environment many, many times before releasing it onto the public domain. I've worked for 15 different companies over the years, contracting as a senior infrastructure network and sort of security engineer. So, every single company, small, medium, and large, that I've contracted for, every single one of them would install all their third-party patches and updates onto a server or network device in a test environment first. Doesn't matter what industry they're in, whether it's finance, banking, whether it's manufacturing, retail, or medical, but they would do it to make sure that nothing breaks before installing it onto a live and production environment. Now, I'm just not buying it. Okay, I'm not having it. We're talking about the Texas-based company CrowdStrike, who are they're a cybersecurity experts, supposedly, and they would have tested their own update before releasing it out to a company like Microsoft, certainly. And this is what I found online yesterday. This is what CrowdStrike said. They said that a sensor configuration update to its Falcon platform triggered a logic error and led to computer crashes. In summary of technical details released by the company, that's CrowdStrike, following a global outage that led to cancelled flights and other disruptions, CrowdStrike said that we are doing a root cause analysis to determine how the logic flaw occurred. Falcon, as in this is the platform where this update went out onto, is a cloud-based system used to block cyber attacks. Then they go on to say that the sensor configuration updates are part of its protection mechanism. I mean, can you hear this? It's a cloud-based system used to block cyber attacks, and the updates are part of its protection mechanism. So this is a cyber security company that provide security against cyber attacks for companies such as Microsoft, have pushed out a sensor configuration update, which is part of the Falcon's protection mechanism. The more I look into this, guys, the more it seems like it was intentional. It has to be. I'm just struggling to accept this level of incompetence from a company whose speciality is IT security, who managed, to deploy an untested update patch onto a cloud-based system specifically designed to detect cyber attacks for clients such as Microsoft. Nah, I'm just not having it. If anyone works in IT or has done, you'll probably be saying the same. Okay, we're just there. We're pretty much done. Individuals and companies in positions of the highest places in the world, and they're making schoolboy errors, similar to the incompetence of the US Secret Service, allowing last week's assassination attempt on Donald Trump to happen. This is exactly what they did. They allowed it to happen, as opposed to it being incompetence. You can't they're not, these people are not schoolboys. So if any of this is staged or intentional, they're not even doing a good job of that. And whilst they're doing that, they're well, firstly they're embarrassing themselves, but they're mugging us lot off. Okay, they're expecting us lot to believe all of this, and it's just, anyway, let's not go down that road because we'll end up going everywhere else. Right, as I finish off, just on a slightly softer note, just to finish off, if you're into or just getting into the prepping arena, then if you want to swap some of that shit that you watch on TV for a couple of half decent films, then just check these ones out. You would have heard of this if you're kind of into the prepping arena or whatever, is Leave the World Behind. I liked that film. It was good. It sees a husband, wife, and kids sort of facing disasters they're absolutely unprepared for via a massive cyber attack. So it causes planes to fall from the skies and an oil tanker beaching itself. The phone, internet, and the GPS networks go down. There's panic amongst the people. There's blackouts and constant EAS or sort of emergency alert messages sort of presented across the TV screens and mobile phones. There are people, well, one person seen stockpiling up and sort of being prepared. The daughter of the family finds a bunker in the neighbour's sort of home, and right at the end, you'll see New York City struck by a couple of missiles, nuclear missiles. So it's all things SHTF, which will be seen sort of throughout. That's fair. It's one worth watching. Then the second one Civil War. On the other hand, that sort of follows a group of journalists led by a legendary sort of war photographer, I believe, as they sort of travel across a war-torn sort of America to interview the president. However, there are bands of sort of Western forces planning on attacks on the White House, and all hell breaks loose. The journalists get entwined into, the conflicts whilst managing to sort of capture much of it on their cameras. It's a good film, but there's just not much to it in terms of a storyline. I suppose if you look at Leave the World Behind, there's things. I had to watch that twice actually. I watched it once and saw it as it was, and then it wasn't until everyone sort of pointed out all sorts of other stuff I had to watch it again. I couldn't believe it. Um, but yeah, it's not. The Civil War's not like that. It's if that's what you're looking for sort of signs and signals and stuff, I think the film itself about the Civil War is the story. That's it. That's telling you that there's the likelihood of that happening. And then the final one. We watched a film last week called The End We Start From. An unusual film title, actually. But again, for me, this is the UK's version of Leave the World Behind. Only typically the English are just too scared to be sending any sort of level of fear into its population at the moment, and instead they sort of present this film based on a natural disaster. So it's like a protracted sort of storms and heavy rains cause London to be flooded, just as a woman sort of she goes into labour, and she sort of gives birth to a baby, sort of a baby son. And then the persistent rain sort of carries on, and the flooding sort of spreads to other lower layer sort of areas in Britain, triggering it's like a countrywide sort of crisis with flood supplies and accommodations for people displaced by the ecological disaster. And again, the British have really tamed this film down. They've sort of presented it more as a survival drama instead of a high sort of octane disaster thriller. But guys, I'm going to leave it there, as I did say this would be a fairly short or shorter session, sort of session than the previous ones. I have a couple of short videos just to finish off. Will be water and preps. That will be, and that will be the first 15, 14 or 15 of this playlist done. Thank God I hear some of you saying, but to that end, guys, I'm off.